Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Captain Lloyd? Ariel muttered to herself. At this precise moment, she noticed Captain Lloyd and his seniors were approaching, and she couldn't help but tuck her long hair, trying to look as attractive as possible while showing her amorous advances. Richard, on the other hand, paid no attention to her. As a result, when he passed by, she called out to him, "Captain Lloyd." As he heard someone addressing him, he turned to face her. Her heart raced even faster when she met his gaze. His gaze was both authoritative and powerful, piercing her to the core. "Are you new here?" Richard inquired. "Yes. I recently relocated here with my colleague." Richard Sr., who stood next to him, had received the notice ahead of time and explained, "Oh right. They were brought here and will stay here for a while." Richard nodded as he continued his conversation with his superior. On the other hand, Ariel was captivated by him as he walked away. She used to think that men in suits and leather shoes were the most attractive, but now she believed that camouflage clothing was the best looking. "He's so handsome." Ariel couldn't stop herself from complimenting Richard. At this point, Ariel noticed a figure who didn't belong there, a petite girl walking down the corridor, dressed casually in sportswear and with her long hair untied. She appeared exhausted and sluggish. Ariel's eyes narrowed at the girl calculatingly. What is such a lovely lady doing here? Beautiful women were natural enemies. Ariel was already hostile and jealous when she first saw this girl. Carlton came over to cheer her up with her favorite snacks when she returned to her room, as he knew that Ariel was upset. As soon as he knocked on the door, Ariel, who was in a good mood, opened the door for him. Her face was bright and cheerful, with no trace of sadness. "Why are you suddenly in such a good mood?" Carlton asked, surprised. "Take a guess," she responded as she pursed her lips. "Didn't you despise it here?" "I simply dislike this place, but I didn't say anything about the people here. I just met the most beautiful man I've ever seen in my whole life." She clasped her hands and placed them on her chest, and her lovely eyes twinkled. It was as if this place was her hunting ground, and she would prey on the most powerful beast. Carlton looked at her with suspicion. He had grown to know her personality over the 3 years they had worked together. She only looked at the wealthy, and she would only marry the affluent. Yet, she desired to marry into a wealthy family because she was an ordinary girl. How could she possibly meet her true love in such a secluded area? "Are you serious?" "Yeah. I saw the most attractive man I've ever seen. He's not only gorgeous but also very noble. He appears to be the son of a wealthy family. You must assist me in pursuing him, Carlton." With a commanding tone, Ariel instructed him. She was Carlton's superior as he was merely her assistant and subordinate. Furthermore, Carlton, who appeared innocent and gentle, had a weak personality, which made him easy to manipulate. "Okay. I'll try my best," he said politely. To be frank, he had feelings for Ariel, but she never noticed him. Ariel underwent plastic surgery to transform her ordinary facial features into a stunning face. With her sexy physique, she knew that she made heads turn whenever she went out. Even now, she considers herself a great beauty, screening and selecting men from all over the world in the hopes of finding someone who would make her wealthy for the rest of her life. On the other hand, Angela went back to her room. Her muscles were aching from today's training, which made her entire body scream. She stared at the ceiling, remembering how Richard had taken the initiative to hug her today. His embrace had a calming effect on her. While she repeated the scene in her head over and over, she became frustrated and wondered if other women would fall in love with him if he hugged them the way she hugged him. Richard must be the center of attraction for all females. Angela sat up, a little upset. "What's going on with me?" Why am I thinking of making Richard mine? Her mother has always provided her with whatever she desired ever since she was a child, so she had never been so eager to possess something. Today, however, she felt compelled to own someone rather than something. She collapsed heavily on the bed once more, and her emotions were a mess. This feeling was so frustrating to her. She couldn't help but think back to what he had said, "Please do not waste your time on me. We can never be together." Her eyes welled up with tears at the thought. Was there someone else in his heart? Was that why he was so certain of their outcome and that she couldn't make him fall for her no matter how hard she tried? She remembered the text message she accidentally caught a glimpse of. It was a paragraph of words. It must be a text from the girl he loves. Is it a love message? So, does he have someone special in his heart? Of course, but why did Trevor and Jared say that he's not in a relationship? Could it be that Richard has a crush on a girl? Angela's heart tightened unexpectedly. The girl adored by him must be the happiest girl. Richard was a quiet and determined man. He would definitely cherish the woman he loved for the rest of his life. What kind of wonderful girl can become his sweetheart? She had finally figured it out. His only reason for rejecting her was that he had a crush on someone else. She was envious of his crush. She must have saved the galaxy in her previous life to be loved by this man. Angela awoke in the evening to find that it was dinner time. The cafeteria was always open on time, and if she missed it, no food would be left for her. Therefore, she hastily tidied up and went to the cafeteria. Richard and his team were present at the time, which surprised her. At this precise moment, Ariel and Carlton stood in line at the cafeteria. Her gaze flickered back and forth at Richard's table. He was seated next to a group of young men. "Follow me," she instructed Carlton. She took her plate and walked toward Richard after she finished speaking. She quickly sat down at Richard's table, and the other team members who were eating raised their heads when they heard a coy female voice. "What a coincidence, Captain Lloyd." Trevor and the other men turned their heads when they noticed a strange girl sitting beside Richard, smiling cheerfully at him. Jared only found out this afternoon that 2 people had been sent for asylum. He assumed it was the 2 people in front of him. "You must be new around here. I heard you secretly taped an important arms trade video." "That's incredible," Jared complimented them. "Don't bring it up, pretty boy. We tremble every time someone mentions it." Ariel played up her amicable persona as she chatted with Jared. After she finished speaking, she returned her gaze to Richard's attractive side. Profile. His determined expression made her heart skip a beat whenever she looked at him. Jared, who was sitting across from her, was watching Richard's expression. Jared now understood why Ariel fell in love with Richard at first sight. He was a stunner and had the skills to back up his looks. "Captain Lloyd, please look after me in the future," Ariel exclaimed. Trevor and Jared, on the other hand, exchanged glances. Richard was extremely popular with women. So quickly did an admirer arrive. With their captain present, there was no doubt that they were able to look at girls as well. Even Sean, the most attractive guy in their group, was disappointed. "You'll be perfectly safe here," Richard quietly consoled her. "Yes. It's all thanks to you, Captain Lloyd, who's capable of keeping us safe," Ariel praised. Angela, who was in the dining area, was taken aback when she noticed Richard and his team at their usual table. There was a girl dressed in a tight dress sitting next to Richard. She spoke to him with a shy smile on her face. Angela's breathing slowed for a few seconds. Could it be the girl he had feelings for? Did he invite her to the base? Even while sitting, the girl had a great figure, exquisite makeup, and a sort of wild beauty to her. She was blinking prettily as she looked at Richard with her smiley, crescent eyes. Is this his type? It was unsurprising for Angela to misunderstand. She knew very little about Richard, and Ariel was a stunning wild beauty. Compared to a good girl like Angela, who had been under strict control since childhood, Ariel was charming. "Hi, Miss Myers." Trevor turned around and waved at her. Angela smiled at Trevor, who was at a distance from her. She then proceeded to Mr. Dwayne's table while carrying her dinner plate. Mr. Dwayne was surprised when she approached him. She was, of course, welcome to join him for dinner. "Are you hurt today, Miss Myers?" a concerned Mr. Wayne asked. "I'm not hurt. My entire body aches," she replied truthfully. "Just practice more." He smiled reassuringly as he said. She gave him a bright grin and nodded. Then, she inadvertently looked across the long table in the direction diagonally opposite from her, and she happened to meet Richard's gaze at that moment. She quickly retracted her gaze after casting a glance at him, whose dark eyes looked at her for some reason. Then, she pretended to listen to Mr. Dwayne's words and stopped looking around. Ariel's gaze was drawn to Angela at this point, and she couldn't help but ask Trevor, "What's the name of the girl you called just now?" "Her name is Angela." "Is she also staying here for protection?" Ariel was intrigued. Trevor didn't want to reveal Angela's identity and the nature of her protection, so he smiled and said, "She's here for a good time." Carlton's eyes couldn't leave Angela either. He was surprised to see such a beautiful girl here, and he could tell she was from a wealthy family thanks to his exceptional observational abilities regarding people. After Richard finished his meal, he immediately stood up and walked over to put away his tray. Coincidentally, Angela, seated next to him at the table, was laughing cheerfully. Her crisp, beautiful, soothing laughter had captured the attention of the young men around her, and they were all turning around to look at her. Richard frowned slightly before glancing at Angela, who was beaming brightly, and then left. As a result, Ariel lost her appetite as she inquired of Sean, "I'd like to know if Captain Lloyd is married. Is he in a relationship?" "I strongly advise you not to pursue our captain, Miss Graham," Sean suggested. "Yeah. Richard has no time to fall in love," Jared added to Sean's words. "Richard is very busy with his work, so please don't bother him, Miss Graham," Trevor said. Ariel blushed, feeling embarrassed, but she grumbled her heart. "I'm free to pursue any man I want. Why should they care?" After the men had placed their plates away, the men left together. At this point, Ariel's eyes were filled with rage, and she noticed Carlton staring at Angela. "I aggravated her mood. Why are you looking at her? Is she as attractive as I am?" Ariel vented her rage at him. She was aware of his feelings for her, so she exploited them to manipulate him. As a result, she was naturally irritated when she noticed him staring at other girls. Although Carlton refrained from responding to Ariel, he secretly thought that Miss Myers was on a different level than Ariel regarding height, appearance, and aura. These were not qualities that any ordinary Jane possessed. Angela was actually quite moody. She didn't feel like eating, so she didn't take too much food for herself. She finished her meal and left right after that. She was quite dejected and was about to return to her room with a downcast spirit. However, she didn't look where she was going and nearly walked into a pole. Luckily, at that moment, a guy's hand reached out to catch her elbow and pulled her away from the pole swiftly, so she was saved from injuring her forehead. Angela then lifted her head and saw Richard's face appeared in front of her. Even under the bright, glittering lights, his sharp features were evident and unable to be softened. "Thanks." Angela expressed her gratitude politely. At that moment, she was annoyed with herself for her bad habit of not looking at where she was going. "Richard, what a coincidence!" Suddenly, a coquettish woman's voice rang out from behind, and the person called his name affectionately. Angela turned around to look at him and saw Ariel heading toward them with an enthusiastic look on her face. Ariel smiled sweetly at Richard before coming to the realization of Angela's presence as she greeted Angela. "Hi, I'm Ariel." "I'm Angela." Angela revealed a slight smile. The girl had addressed Richard by his first name, so they must be quite close to each other. As such, Angela was quite perceptive, and she mentioned, "I'll leave now to give you guys some private time together." After Angela finished saying that, she initially intended to go back to her room, but she suddenly had a whim and decided to walk in the direction of the front door. However, the night skies had completely darkened. Richard didn't even bother to cast eyes on Ariel, but he turned around to look at the figure at the doorway who had gradually disappeared in the distance. Subsequently, he shot a look at Ariel. "You should go back to your room and get some rest. I'm busy." He finished saying that and strode briskly toward the front door. As for Angela, she walked slowly and arrived by the side of the sports field. She walked past a grassy patch and noticed a rock blocking her path. She lifted her feet to kick it aside, but the rock was half embedded in the ground, so her kick did not dislodge the stone at all. Unfortunately for her, she injured her toe in the process. Ouch! Oh my goodness! She bent down in pain and thought to herself, everything's a mess. However, she was unaware that right behind her, about 5 meters away, a man had already come after her. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she did not realize he was there. Therefore, the scene of her kicking the stone and injuring herself along the process was taken in by the man. He couldn't help smiling with a slightly resigned expression. This woman doesn't quite learn from her mistakes, and she keeps getting herself into trouble. Angela noticed that there was a bench by the side, so she slowly hobbled over. Just as she was about to take a seat, she saw from the side of her eyes that there was a person behind her. Alarmed, she instantly turned around to look at him. She saw that it was Richard standing there with his arms crossed, and she wasn't sure how long he had been standing there. Angela blushed bright red. He always seemed to pop up out of nowhere and ended up beside her as he watched while she made a fool of herself. He was always there when she landed in an embarrassing situation, which made it annoying for her. Angela bit her lips and removed her sports shoes to check on her toe. Thanks to the kick that she delivered to herself, her toe was now swollen on the nail bed. She heard his approaching footsteps, so she swiftly wore her socks again as she didn't plan on letting him see her injured toe. After all, she didn't want to be ridiculed by him for deserving this. "Captain Lloyd, why aren't you keeping Miss Graham company? Why are you here?" Angela said this slightly huffily. Hearing this, he was slightly shocked. Then, he walked over to sit next to her. He kept his eyes on her foot that was without any shoes on. "Did you injure yourself?" Angela acted nonchalantly and put on her shoes. "No, I didn't. I'm perfectly fine." "Next time, stop doing things that will hurt you," Richard reminded her. If he hadn't caught her on time earlier on, she would have sustained an injury on her forehead. Angela ran a hand through her long hair. "Thanks for your concern. Miss Graham is quite pretty. She's stunning and hot. You've got a great taste, Captain Lloyd." There was a significantly stunned look on his handsome face by then. However, he didn't get the chance to explain himself as Angela continued, "She must be the girl that you're in love with, huh? I wish you guys a lifetime of happiness. Don't worry. I won't bother you guys. If you can't trust me, I can get Sean to be my boyfriend so that there won't be any misunderstanding on Miss Graham's part." Richard finally caught on to what she meant. Angela continued to chatter on without paying attention to him. "I admit that I have some feelings toward you, but it's just some slight feelings, that's all. You don't have to worry about me going after you persistently. I wouldn't go to that extent." All of a sudden, he realized that if he remained silent, she could go on and on. So, he decided to just remain silent to find out what she was going to say subsequently. She took a deep breath and turned around to look at the man next to her. She scrutinized him for a few seconds with her pretty eyes, after which she asked with a slightly annoyed tone, "Are you staying in the same room with Miss Graham?" Richard continued to be silent. Suddenly, Angela felt as if there was a huge load on her chest and her eyes turned red-rimmed subsequently. She thought of him staying in the same room with another woman and holding another woman in his arms as they went to sleep together. Then, she reckoned that soon enough, she would probably see him showing his affections for another woman publicly. At that moment, she wished to get away from him as far as possible. She turned her face in the other direction dejectedly and said, "Richard, can you send someone else to protect me? I don't need your protection." "Why?" the man next to her asked in a hoarse voice. Angela tried hard to suppress her emotions, but suddenly, she broke down upon hearing his words. Her voice broke as she sobbed, "Because I don't want to see you." After she had said that, she lifted her hand to swipe at the tears on her face. At that point, there was a stunned expression on Richard's handsome face and he gently pressed his large palms against her shoulders. However, she didn't turn around to look at him but shifted her body and maintained a distance from him. Finally, Richard realized the severity of the situation, so he stood up abruptly and came to her side. Under the lights, Angela's eyes were filled with tears and as she pursed her lips, her expression was full of desolation. He felt a pang in his heart and his expression was one of anxiousness. Instinctively, he squatted down and reached out to stroke her face. Startled, she trembled slightly and looked at him confusedly until she realized that his rough fingers were indeed stroking her cheeks. She was stunned in place and she wondered if this was a dream. Is this man actually wiping away my tears for me? Why you should leave? Angela realized that she should not let him continue doing that. After all, the woman he loved was there, so he should not behave so intimately with her. Suddenly, Richard heaved a sigh. Subsequently, he stretched his arms and tugged her. An unsuspecting Angela was pulled up from her seat and her teary face bumped against his firm chest. She felt a firm arm wrapping itself around her waist and the back of her head was also firmly pressed. She was forced to remain in his arms with no other option. "You." "Richard, let go of me." She felt then that he was such a SC** mag. His girlfriend was by his side and yet he was here taking the initiative to pursue her. Does he want me to become a SC** bag like him? Are you dumb? Suddenly, there was a low voice that rang out from above her head chidingly. Angela was instantly angered. How dare he scold me? She struggled hard to lift her head and as she did that, she met his dark eyes full of annoyance and frustration. However, she didn't realize that underneath all that, there was some other much more complicated emotion hidden behind his eyes. He seemed to be trying hard to suppress his urges. Her eyes glittered with tears and to him, that triggered his anger very much. Richard was quite tempted to rap her on the forehead as he narrowed his eyes with annoyance. You haven't even figured out the truth, and yet you've started to tear up into such a state. Are your tears so easily spilled? She found herself at a loss for words. What is he on about? I don't get it. Richard, what the heck are you trying to say? Just get straight to the point. Don't beat around the bush, because I wouldn't get it. Also, don't you dare to scold me. Angela flared up all of a sudden. She didn't wish to appear as a clueless bimbo in front of him. Ariel just arrived at the base today and similarly, she is one of the people under protection to avoid triggering a sensitive matter. I didn't even know her at all before this, Richard explained in a low voice. At that moment, Angela was rendered mind-blown and she remained in a dazed state for several seconds before covering her face with both hands out of embarrassment. She screamed repeatedly in her mind, I should just disappear from the face of this earth. This is so mortifying. Why do I keep doing such stupid, thoughtless things in front of him? Angela wished hard to be able to reverse time. However, suddenly, she felt a wave of emotions and she reached out to angrily pummel his chest. Stupid guy. He could have told me about that earlier. Why did he allow me to keep on misunderstanding the situation? Richard, you're such a pain. Angela chided him angrily. Meanwhile, he looked at her resignedly. And he could feel a headache coming. She persisted and tried her best to push the blame on him, though. You could have just told me about your relationship with Ariel earlier. You need to change your habit of keeping silent all the time. If you keep up this bad attitude, I won't bother with you. Richard didn't even say another word, and he grabbed the back of her head and exerted pressure as he pressed her head against his chest. Her chiding words became muffled as he held her in his arms. Angela finally came back to her senses and realized that she was in his arms and held tightly by him. She reached out as well and wrapped her arms around his waist tightly without hesitation. She smiled furtively in his arms, and although she had embarrassed herself, at least he knew how to comfort her. You mentioned earlier that you were going to get Sean to be your boyfriend, huh? Suddenly, there was a cold, interrogative voice that rang out from the top of her head. Angela felt a cold breeze transverse across as she lifted her head up to look at his angry expression. She felt slightly aggrieved, but she was keener to find out if he was actually jealous. Sean's quite handsome, gentle, and witty too. He's also quite kind toward me. She tried to sound him out, so she purposely heaped praises upon Sean. Poor Sean was unwittingly dragged into this, and at the moment, he sneezed hard in his hostel all of a sudden as a wave of unease ran through him. Richard glanced at the woman, who was currently in his arms and yet busy praising another man, and his eyes gradually reverted to his usual cold gaze. Angela bit her lips and didn't finish her sentence. She pressed her face tightly back into his chest without saying another word. She decided to stop talking and just focus on hugging him. At that moment, there was a squeaking sound of mice on the ground. Angela leaped up and quite naturally clung to him tightly. Subsequently, he carried her into his arms. Her red lips curved up, and there was a pleased look on her as she glanced at his handsome face. She explained to him, although Sean's great, personally, I'd prefer someone like Captain Lloyd. Her words were evidently a confession of her feelings. Richard, who was generally decisive, ruthless, and always had a cold look on his face, suddenly blushed slightly. However, it was too dark at night, so Angela didn't realize that. My foot hurts. Captain Lloyd, could you please carry me back? Angela spoke coyly. He didn't turn her request down, and he carried her toward the direction of the front door of the base. Just as they were about to arrive at the entrance of the base, she requested for him to put her down. She did that all for the sake of his reputation and didn't wish for him to be a topic of speculation. He had quite a high position here, and if everyone saw him carrying her around every single day, then there would be plenty of rumors about him that arose. Angela was very pleased with his performance tonight. Although he had caused her to embarrass herself and confess her feelings, at least it had generated some response from him. I'll head over to your room to take a shower later. Is that fine? She lifted her head and asked. Sure, come on over. Richard nodded. She scanned from left to right with her pretty eyes and thought, the coast is clear right now. Is this the perfect time to sneak a kiss? Lower your head. I've got something to tell you. Angela twisted her fingers and made a request with a slightly awkward look on her face. Richard did as told, and he naturally lowered his tall body to lower his head and listen to what she had to say. However, as soon as he lowered his head, a pair of soft lips planted a kiss on his cheek quite swiftly. He was stunned, and he turned around to glance at the girl who'd taken advantage of him. At that moment, she stayed behind and didn't run away from him. Furthermore, she revealed a dazzling smile to him. Did you like that? Then, there was a flash of tenderness in his eyes, but he didn't say a word. However, the look in his eyes clearly spoke volumes and indicated that he was perfectly fine with her behaving without any restraint in front of him. I'll see you later. Angela turned around and fled after finishing her sentence. Simply put, she could not look him in the eye due to her flushed face, so she had to run. She returned to her room, her heart pounding as she smiled foolishly. She had a sweet expression on her face as her eyes sparkled since she was thrilled. She felt that her relationship with Richard had improved substantially. The aloof and indifferent expression on his face had vanished, and it was evident that he had enjoyed the sneak kiss she gave him earlier. Meanwhile, Ariel was throwing a tantrum in her room because she had just realized that no private bathroom was available. Being a girl, she found the idea of having to use the public bathhouse to take a shower to be unacceptable. She went to the management office to express her concern, but they told her to use the public bathhouse. She left the office in an inconsolable rage and barely managed to keep her calm. It dawned on her that she wasn't the only female guest. Where does Angela take her shower? She certainly wouldn't shower in the public bathhouse. She wanted to find out where Angela took a shower so she could use the same bathroom. Ariel proceeded to ask around until she finally received the answer in secret from a male staff member. He informed her that Angela had a designated area for shower and that she had gone to Richard's private in-soot bathroom. They were currently located in the deep mountains, so resources were limited, everything was streamlined, and few people had the privilege of having an in-soot bathroom. When she heard that, her eyes lit up. So, Angela takes a shower in Richard's room, which means I can do the same. At that moment, she recalled that she had packed 2 slinky nightgowns on purpose when packing her clothes, and now it came in handy. Ariel returned to her room and hastily took out a nude pink nightgown from her wardrobe before picking out a long coat. She intended to wrap that around herself after she finished her shower, as no one other than Richard could get to see her in a nightgown. She was not in a hurry to head to Richard's room at the moment because she hoped to stall for more time. Once everyone in this hostel block fell asleep, it would be much more convenient for her to make her way to his room. She pulled out a vanity mirror and began admiring her beauty. She took a closer look and concluded that the results of her cosmetic surgery were excellent because the scars from the operation were hardly noticeable. She compared her new, refined appearance to the one she had before by moving her eyes, nose, and lips. Ariel could not help but think of Angela. Since she was so accustomed to visiting the plastic surgeon's hospital, she was confident that she could tell if a woman had undergone cosmetic procedures at a glance. She was envious to learn that Angela was a natural beauty with perfect features. She also admired Angela's flawless skin. Still, Ariel considered her merits and concluded that Angela was too brainy and didn't appear to be the type men preferred. On the other hand, she was flirtatious and seductive, and a single glance could easily win a man's heart. Furthermore, she was far more open-minded than Angela. Angela regained her composure in the room before grabbing her pajamas and heading to Richard's room to shower. She brought the same set of pajamas as before, with the addition of a robe for an extra layer of warmth. After all, it was getting colder outside. In late autumn, the temperature significantly differed between night and day in a remote mountainous region. During the day, the temperature reached 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but at night, it dropped to 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Angela sneezed a few times, possibly because she had caught a chill when she ran out of her room. Right now, she could feel her body getting colder. Please don't tell me that I've caught a cold. Please, no. That would be awful. She couldn't help but think to herself. Angela went to Richard's room, put out her hand to knock on the door, and someone opened the door from the inside. He had just gotten out of the shower and was dressed casually. There were still some droplets of water on his dark hair. "Did you just take a shower?" she asked shyly, still smelling the faint mint scent on his body. "Yup." He moved sideways to let her in. She sneezed twice as soon as she entered the room, leaving her slightly embarrassed. Suddenly, a large hand touched her forehead, and as she stood there in shock, she felt his palm press against her forehead twice. He said hushedly, "You seem to have a slight fever." "Are you sure about that?" "I don't think so." Angela felt slightly dizzy but didn't think that she might have caught a cold. "Try and take a warm shower," Richard instructed her. Angela nodded and headed in the direction of the bathroom. "He's such a simple man," she thought as she pursed her lips and smiled in front of the bathroom mirror, looking at the water glass and electric shaver. The sound of Angela taking a shower was clearly audible in the room, and it distracted the man reading a book. Finally, he ended up putting down his book and rubbing the spot between his brows. At that moment, his cell phone pinged, and he received a notification of a text message. Richard took his cell phone and glanced at it. Before he even looked at it, he had a rough idea of who it was. It was from Annie, who had recently sent him more than 3 text messages daily. The gist of her message was to confess her love for him and express her expectant feelings to meet up as soon as possible. Even though he didn't respond to that, her enthusiasm was not dampened. Right now, there was indeed a text message from her. "Richard, are you busy at the moment? I had a dream today, and you were in it. I was delighted. Could you send me a photo of you? I realize that I've nearly forgotten how you look." He was looking at his cell phone screen when he heard a sound from the bathroom. Angela was opening the door. Instantly after that, he made a silly gesture of flinging it aside. He threw his cell phone to the pillow on the couch by his side, swiftly picking up the book he had just put aside to read. Angela came out of the bathroom, and she caught a glimpse of him from behind as he sat quietly on the couch, reading a book. She put on her robe and walked in his direction. Her long hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her soft hair was too hard to keep in place, so some loose was strewn around her flawless, milky white face. She seemed to give out a charming aura all of a sudden. She was slightly thirsty, so she looked at the pot of tea he had brewed on the table and asked directly, "Can I have some of your tea?" Richard nodded slightly, so she happily clutched onto his mug and drank the hot tea. At that moment, she felt as if life was perfect. She held his mug and observed him while sipping slowly. He could feel her lovely eyes locked on his face and body. She appeared to regard the man in front of her as if he were a perfectly sculpted statue. He felt uneasy with how she looked at him, as indicated by his handsomely unsettling facial expression. Eventually, he could not endure it and put down the book to ask with narrowed eyes, "Why are you staring at me like that?" "I enjoy staring at you," she said with a generous smile. At that moment, Angela heard the notification of a text message coming from behind the pillow she leaning on. She lowered her head to search for it, and at the same time, she reached out to grab the black cell phone. However, a strong masculine body pressed against her at that moment, startling her. As soon as she regained her composure, she was half lying on the couch with Richard on top of her. Furthermore, when she was caught off guard, he had already grabbed his cell phone, which she held in her hands. She was momentarily dumbfounded, but then she realized that he had given such a massive response because he wanted to grab his cell phone. Could it be that he has a message on his cell phone that he wants to keep hidden from everyone? After all, she couldn't look at it because he had a password set up. However, she was perplexed as to why he reacted so. His reaction mirrored the actions of someone who had something to hide. Angela sat up with resentment on her beautiful face and stared at him with lovely eyes. "What made you react so badly earlier?" "I'm sorry." Richard had an unsettling expression on his handsome face. He had indeed reacted inappropriately earlier. "Was it a text message from a girl?" she asked, and her gaze fixed on him. He firmly denied it. "No." She was then convinced that the message was sent by a girl. Suddenly, she became agitated. "Who sent him that text message?" "Captain Lloyd, it appears that you have a large number of admirers." "Where do I rank on the list?" She laughed at herself. Richard checked his wristwatch for the time and saw that it was 8:30. He murmured, you should return to your room and get some rest. Angela crossed her arms in front of her and made it clear that she was not going anywhere. I'm not sleepy yet. He glanced at her with a slightly resigned expression. He realized he couldn't talk sense into this woman when she was being stubborn.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.